Hi guys, welcome to I'm Just Gonna Say It Anyway, the show where we discuss and dissect controversial topics, morals, and anything American. My name is Lily Sumner, and I'm your host. And today we're diving into a major societal shift that has been shaping our world for decades. The decline of collective responsibility and its impact on social cohesion. Now, before we get started in today's episode, I want to give you a little bit of a rundown on what exactly I'm Just Going to Say It Anyway is, and who am I, because this is our first episode. My name is Lily Sumner. I'm 18 years old currently, and I love absolutely everything to do with basically society as a whole, the psychological, the economic factors, everything that it entails. Now, some of my background is I was raised in Kentucky, and I started my own business as a sophomore in high school called PEEP, Find Your Purpose Through Experience and Exposure with Passion, which is a 13-lesson program that walks students through the journey of finding what career they want to pursue. And then I also founded Wrapped in God's Warmth, a nonprofit organization, in the winter of 2018 when I was 12 years old in 6th grade, and we do seasonal kits to distribute to the homeless. And hopefully in the future we will continue to grow to do some educational program because that's more of what society seems to need, but we mainly prioritize my local area to help those out. But let's talk about what I'm Just Gonna Say It Anyway is. So we are a podcast and video series that is going to dissect anything American. So all the morals, think of like anything societal that is main heavy American. Like when the first thing you think of, I may think of French fries or a hamburger, but we're going to talk about society as a whole, the way our government functions, the way, social media plays in a role, especially into our economy with all the major businesses we have stationed here. But we're going to really take a deep dive into also controversial topics and morals, heavily morals and ethical values, which we will be defining exactly what we mean by morals and ethics here soon. Today's topic is the decline of collective responsibility and its impact on social cohesion. So recently I did an essay for one of my dual credit classes because I want to knock out, some college courses to keep that debt a bit under. But I found it really interesting to read about religion and social media's influence on radical individualism and moral relativism. And I was starting to look into all that, and I realized how much both those things factor in so heavily into almost this collective responsibility we have, especially as Americans, basically that due diligence. We're born here and we should respect the rights and freedoms we're given as Americans of being able to get a driver's license, all those simple things. But I thought it was really interesting to take a deep dive into how it impacts us as a whole. In America, it's very individualistic. Individualism is very heavy, but have we pushed that bar almost too far that it destroys home lives and the central family and how children are being raised? So we're going to explore all of that today within our episode.
And I know the wicked never rest, so I always try my best, but there's some lessons hard for me to learn, like good boys don't play with bad girls.
Now let's get started. We're going to explore how the rise of unchecked individualism, moral relativism, and progressive ideologies have eroded moral standards in modern society. The left's push for morals subjectively and breakdown of traditional values has weakened America's foundation. Now, traditional values, I am not saying to jump all the way back to like the 1500s or anything of that sort when murder was rampage and people thought it was right. I mean, let's that kind of happens throughout society as a whole, to be honest, throughout everything, but we're going to take a look at traditional values of more of a conservative perspective, almost the nuclear family look, or better yet, how do those basic moral responsibilities as a human and really what they are and how have they changed? You know, the responsibility to take care of those around you. Be the doer, don't be the follower. To be the leader, to step forward and take care. When there's a piece of trash, you don't just overstep it until someone tells you to pick it up. You pick it up yourself. Those responsibilities and traditional values of my little actions can do good. But we're going to provide deeper insight. We will integrate perspectives from a recent essay and interview that I did with Kevin Kramer as well. He is a District 11 councilman for Louisville, Kentucky, and he has also been a theology teacher for about 22 years, teaching about Catholicism. He also has firsthand experience in understanding the role of radical individualism and moral relativism in today's culture. So, we'll back this up with reliable sources, so buckle up. This is going to be a thought-provoking ride. So let's start with this. Number 1, are we born with moral standards? I mean, growing up, I feel like as we first come out, we're given with that first individualistic ideology of what do I need? What do I need? So we start crying as a baby. We gotta cry because we need help. We need food because we can't do things on our own. But as we grow up, we start to share. We start to learn how to be a good person through actions of showing kindness, responsibility, and care for the world around us. Now, the average person recognizes differences in people's wants, looks, and preferences. But what about moral standards? Are we born with them, or do we develop them through society and upbringing? Now, research suggests that individual morals tend to derive from religious beliefs and early teachings from parents or guardians. I mean, various religions, whether Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or Hinduism, they all uphold the same core moral principles that promote justice, kindness, and responsibility. I mean, immediately we were brought with this as we're being raised. And personally, I was raised in a Catholic household, and I am a practicing Catholic. But something I have been learning at school in my different religions class, so we go and we basically do deep dives into different religions to try and understand what they are, is that every single religion usually has that. I'm sorry, that's overgeneralizing. A majority of religions have some moral or ethical code for people to follow. And I just really wanted to compare them. And I thought it was very interesting to read them and see that they all promote these main 4 things, which is justice, kindness, and responsibility. And usually, in the end, somehow all of those lead to collective responsibilities and cohesion. Yet, despite these foundations now, we're witnessing a prominent decline in those collective responsibility that is impacting social cohesion. Now, is that because of a decline of a stable household with teaching religions? I know a majority of people, some have practicing religion, but we also have seen a huge decline in participation in churches. I know especially for the Catholic faith, we have seen that. Now, a 2010 study by Yale University researchers found that even babies as young as 3 months old show a preference for altruistic behavior, suggesting an innate sense of morality. However, as people grow, their environment, especially social media and shifting cultural standards, shapes moral development. Now, I think that's something very impactful to think about. We may be raised in a household, but then it's in our school systems of where we start to have all of those other teachings that really fuel who we are as a person and what we begin to believe. And I think that's something very interesting to also talk about is what has a huge impact are our social groups and our home life. Now, the home life is what sets those basic standards. And then you go into the social life, and those confirm or either deny what you're taught at home. And that's the person's choice whether to accept that denial or to go forth with whatever belief their friends have, and if they want to conform to it or to stick to their path. I know as I was growing up, a huge thing was social media, and I was like, I really want to be in it. I want to be just like all those girls. I want to fit in. That need for almost a social cohesion in some capacity. I wanted to give up my set morals, my set beliefs by showing off my body or other things like that. And there's a lot of pressure like that almost segregates all social cohesion ideas into us and just puts this ideology of individualism, a radical individualism of it is you, your body, and the value you hold on those likes you get on social media is far more important than any moral or ethical standard you should have for yourself. And then it becomes this almost endless cycle of me, 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 me. So we're going to get to that in a second. Kind of rabbled off on that one, but a Gallup poll in 2023 revealed that 83% of Americans believe moral values are worsening, which raises the question, what causes this decline? Now, welcome to segment 2 of this. We're doing this in like 10-minute parts, it seems, as of the first segment, which was also the introduction as well. But, so today, now the next part, was what is really causing this decline? And as I've done some research and whatnot, which I will include all of the evidence and resources that I have used today here in the bio below as well, and you can go and click and read them for your own interpretation of the data and to look at the statistics as well. But the rise of radical individualism and the breakdown of traditional values. Let's start with individualism. Now, don't get me wrong, personal freedom and independence are really the cornerstones of American success and what America is. That you come here for your dream. This is the dreamland of your dreams, or the land of your dreams, I'm sorry. But that's what America was, especially back in the day in the 1800s when people were immigrating heavily and they started coming over here and they wanted to start a family. They wanted all the success you can get. I mean, think of the Great Gatsby when they talk about immigration and stuff like that. All those things that were happening during that time period, But all of this, when individualism, when it's taken to an extreme, I think it almost seems to lead to a sort of moral decay. I mean, our founding fathers understood that liberty only works when paired with personal responsibility. Yet again, there is that responsibility. And I feel like that's almost so key into where this moral decline has gone. We don't see responsibility as something we have to take on. It's almost something we try to defer from. But today we see a culture that really glorifies selfishness and shuns duty to family, faith, and country. Now, something I think is really crazy is when people started to burn the American flag. And I think that shows a bit of no care to those who have served in the country, who literally put their lives on the line for all of us during those hard times. And it shows disrespect to our country. And I think that's something that people don't understand is almost respect with your responsibility. As a citizen, we are born with a responsibility to go and vote, to go and put our effort forward into our country if we want change instead of doing radical things or crazy, outlandish actions like jumping to burning a flag. Kevin Kramer emphasizes in our interview that we had that America was built on individualism, yet that has now been distorted into a radical individualism. Now, with that comes value setting, and that really starts within social media. And I feel like, as you grow up, you start to set your value upon certain things. Like this pen, let's say this pen is very, very important to me. My value to try not to lose this. So a responsibility I place upon myself not to lose this pen is because I have a high value upon it. We don't have that high value for our communities anymore, that high value for our neighbor down the road. You know, we've stopped taking on these extra responsibilities because we don't have a want. One of my favorite, statistic things of psychology is the 80% the want, 20% the do, those 80-20s. And I really think it's true. Because people are not going to do it if they don't want to. Like people who say they hate their job and they really don't want to go to work, you know they're going to work. Because they want money. They want the one thing they can get out of it. Something they can get out of it. Instead of valuing community and shared responsibility, people prioritize self-interest above all else lately. And something of that is, back again, social media, how we prioritize getting likes. What can we post? What will get us likes? Social media has fueled this by reinforcing self-centered mindsets, with many teenagers replacing real-world interactions with digital validation. This self-focus undermines the moral responsibility that once bound communities together. So instead of going out and seeing people who are struggling, instead we record them. We don't help them. We record them to post it online to see how many likes we can get. Because that's the gratification. To sell the bad in the world. Now, conservative scholar Patrick Deneen, in Why Liberalism Failed, points out that the progressive agenda has placed self-gratification above responsibility, dismantling the very institutions that once kept our nation strong. When traditional values like marriage, family, and patriotism are undermined, social cohesion suffers. You know, something about America is we're supposed to be united. United States. I feel like it's quite just literally there in the name. United States of America. United we stand, divided we fall. Now, everyone really talks about how there's so much segregation and everything going on, but I think, and now I'm not talking about segregation of races, I'm talking about ideologies. And I think that is very true about what is happening in our community. These ideas are being pushed so far against each other. We are not trying to find this happy medium of honoring and respecting our country. And that's where that collective responsibility starts to fall yet again. But it's in those marriages, it's in that family that you are taught about that collective responsibility. So now if students and children are not being taught that value of do not place yourself so high above everything and everyone else in your life, then how are we ever going to be united in the United States again fully? You know, and it really just undermines all social cohesion. And I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy when people at school, I've seen it so many times, and I don't understand. But that's because the morals and the ethical code I was raised with my parents. They raised me that as soon as I see a piece of trash on the ground, as soon as I see someone drop something, oh, hey, you dropped this. You pick it up almost before they can react. You pick up the piece of trash and you throw it away without being asked, without any gratification needed. This whole outward praise and need to feel that that people are above everyone else. It's causing a radical individualism, leading to a divide in people. Now, number 3, the role of moral relativism in the left's war on truth. Now let's talk about moral relativism. So these are the two big things we've been talking about so far, is radical individualism, now moral relativism. And that is the idea that morality is subjective, changes based on feelings, rather than a universal truth. This ties directly into that radical individualism. People nowadays think, oh, my truth is the truth. There's only one truth, and that is mine. That is so far from the truth. The truth is that there is a universal truth. There's one set truth. It's like trying to tell me 2 + 2 = 5, because that's my truth, or your truth. And, it's like saying math can't math. You basically could explain it that way. And I think that's something that is so far fetch from the real truth. Now, you can have subjective thoughts and opinions, but it doesn't make it the truth. And now this philosophy heavily promoted has led to cultural chaos. If nothing is objectively right or wrong, then anything goes, including corruption, crime, the breakdown of literally law and order. And that's the big thing about America, is our governmental structure, our law and order, the way we have one president and we have Congress. We have 3 branches of that Congress. We have checks and balances, a way to balance it out. The people decide who are in those seats. We pick. And I think that's something so important to also look at, is the radical individualism and how it ties into our truth, and basically how then it ties into our government. And, if people in the government didn't have a set right or wrong or morals, then where's the law and order in all that? And I think that also then just ties to normal citizens. If they have if they can't realize that there is a universal truth, then the way we vote in people, the way we take actions for policies and advocate for things, there is going to be no truth. There's going to be segregation and so much division in ideas that people begin to hate each other. And I think that's just where it all comes together. The radical individualism and the moral relativism, and how they start to boom. And it causes basically an explosion of all these ideas just being puked out now of, my idea is the truth, 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 truth. But then we can never find that happy medium ground, which is that universal truth. Now, Kevin Kramer, when interviewed, he explained that one of the greatest concerns in his teachings is the growing belief that my truth is the truth, and your truth is your truth. The mindset contradicts the most basic tenets of major religions, which emphasize a shared moral structure. The erosion of this shared framework leads to a lack of accountability and justification for any action under the guise of personal morality. Exactly what we just talked about. How people think their truth is the truth, and it leads to a moral decline. Now, Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker, in The Better Angels of Our Nature, great book, argues that when people reject traditional moral frameworks, society descends into disorder. We see this happening now with rising crime rates, attacks on religious freedom, and radical ideologies being pushed in our schools. Instead of teaching hard work and ethics, the progressive agenda promotes entitlement and victimhood. And I think that really says it all, especially how that radical individualism ties to that moral relativism, leading to a destruction in that social cohesion. Now, moving on to part 4 now, the consequences on social cohesion. So what happens when collective responsibility fades? What is going to happen to our society? Well, society becomes more fragmented. Everyone today talks about how polarized things are. Yet they sit there with their polarization, because my truth is my truth and your truth is your truth. What is that universal truth? That's where we're going to find a way to stop this fragmentation of people, basically, and of beliefs. No, I'm not saying everyone is ever going to believe the same thing. That is not true, and that is not how it should be. Diversity in ideas is the best way to have things, but we also should look for a truth, a set in stone way of morals and ethics. Otherwise, people will see, murder as the right thing, where others will see that as wrong. So where do we find that right and wrong with our actions? So with this fragmentation, distrust grows, and our national identity weakens. That's where that patriotism begins to fall yet again. That traditional values of a family, and that faith and country filled, or family faith filled country. The assault on law enforcement, faith, and traditional institutions has created a society where people no longer, they don't trust their neighbors, their leaders, or even their own communities. And I feel like we see that often. A lot of people never know what's going to happen, and I think there's a lot of distrust in I mean, just a lot of trust issues within society right now, with trusting people and how they're going to handle things. Now, studies by the Heritage Foundation show that crime is rising in cities where progressive policies have been implemented, including defunding the police, prioritizing so-called social justice over law and order. Now, Kevin Kramer also pointed out that social media not only isolates people, but also exacerbates individualism, making it harder to foster a sense of shared responsibility. Now, I think that word exacerbates is immediately what we need to think of and always remember, because that is what social media does. That's what a lot of our culture does. We exacerbate that individualism, those thoughts of just me, my truth over your truth. There is no truth. Your truth is so wrong, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And that causes all these ideas and policies to be implemented where it's forget that law and order, forget that basic foundation that we were trying to lay, forget 1776, none of that matters, that Constitution, everything, all that out the door. It's like, how are we supposed to function as a country? And everyone is complaining right now, especially with this heated election that happened recently and all of the executive orders that have been made. A lot of people are on edge and they think that there is this huge segregation of ideas. And I really feel like that's also just because we don't have that foundational moral and ethical code because of radical individualism and no social cohesion. Moral relativism and individualism have really pushed an extent of our country. And now the decline in community involvement has led to more dependency on government programs as well. People who don't want to contribute to the community are causing the government to overspend on so many programs, and there's a lot of programs that people have become dependent on. There's people that I'm aware of that are surrounded in my family that they only work one job, so then they get all that programs because they don't want to have to work more and struggle to go up. They just want to stay in that program. Now, if you're staying in that program, you're not taking on your responsibilities to try, to push yourself. But that's the thing is that the correct moral or ethical code, or is that just my truth? What is the truth then? Now, this, rather than fostering like self-reliance and strong family units to go back and turn into your family, we're looking to depend on the government so heavily. But then people are saying they don't want to do that, but yet that's exactly what they're doing. And people are choosing comfort and ease over commitment to moral standards because you look for the comfort. Everyone does. I mean, that's one of my favorite things to do. I mean, I love to put myself out there, and one of the biggest things is to make myself comfortable in things that make me uncomfortable. I think that's something very important, is that people don't push themselves to get uncomfortable. They don't ask those uncomfortable questions because it's uncomfortable. Now, why? Because it's easy. They want the easy way out. That's not what we should be teaching people. The easy way out has never gotten us anywhere. I'm sorry. But, writing the Olive Branch Treaty, do we think that was easy? Do we think us in 1776 leaving Great Britain, saying we're done and separating from them, sending a list of all of our transgressions, everything like that to the king, do you think we're done? Do we think that was just easy? That was not the easy way out. We fought hard to get out. And I think that is something so important to look at. And that is taught in every history class. That we eventually left and became the 13 colonies. That's what we were at the start, And we left and now then we had our own journey of craziness within us, But we eventually wound up here. We're doing a lot better. But I really think that is something, I keep saying this. Radical individualism and moral relativism push so many of these ideas that lead to the separation of ideas. Fragmentation in society, no social cohesion, and no collective responsibility. Now, this leads us onto our last little bit, part 5. How do we fix this? How do we right this wrong? Now, we don't just want to highlight the problem here. We want solutions, usually. And now, I'm not really saying, I got solutions. I'm not the smartest, and I don't know all the truth. I don't know everything. I'm very much so. I do not know that much. I do my research and what I can at my time and at my age. In a few ways, I feel like rebuilding collective responsibility. A lot of this is opinionated and based off of the sources I have, and I will make sure those are all posted, and you guys can draw your own conclusion on all this as well. But I feel like a few ways that we can rebuild, a collective responsibility. Start by restoring some faith and family values. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to join a religion. I get some people don't feel like that's their right path, but personally, I believe trusting in God and putting faith and trust in something helps you realize you have the power and the will to do what you want and that you can trust. And I think that was something I mentioned earlier as well, that a lot of people feel like they are losing trust in society and that there's a lot of distrust. And family values. America was built on Judeo-Christian principles. And, I think we should really kind of return to that. Strong families create strong communities. And I think when the way you're raised is how you're going to act when you're older, it shows. And I'm not saying that some people will turn out, not everyone's going to turn out how their parents were to them, but it influences you, because experience and exposure are everything. What you are exposed to and what you are raised in influence absolutely every part of your life. And if you have a strong family, a strong core, then it will create strong communities. And I think that, honestly, let's tie that into some governmental factors. Let's talk about Federalist number 70. Alexander Hamilton describes how we needed a strong executive branch, an energetic branch, because that's what we need to have a strong community, which is Congress, a strong Congress. If that's the way we believe our Congress should function, then so shouldn't we almost act that way as well? I'm not saying to be exactly like those people, but I'm saying that's what works. You have to find that strong central foundation to be able to grow. And with that moral relativism and a radical individualism, it kind of tears us down and gets us to forget about everyone else around us, makes us very selfish and self-centered. Now, number 2 on my other idea is, encourage civic engagement and patriotism. Instead of pushing globalism, which I think is pushed a lot to people of go conquer it all, we should really reinstate a sense of national pride. I understand, I'm not saying to believe and agree with everything I'm saying, by the way, as well, or my political beliefs, but I think really if we can reinstate some sense of a national pride that, you still have all these rights, you have all of these freedoms. I mean, let's think about all of those other places that still suppress women. Here I am, able to record my own podcast. I'm out here, doing what I want. Nothing's tampering on me because I'm a woman. I think that's something to really be grateful for. If we can think of all of these great things we are blessed with instead of constantly stating, this country sucks. Well, if you really don't like it, go change it. Go talk to your legislator. They will make change. They will advocate for you because that is their job. Instead of just sitting around, which is something I feel like is taught with that radical individualism, is that selfishness of everyone should do it for me, of me, my truth is the truth. Then if you really think that's the truth, then get up and go do it. Go talk about it. Go fight for it. And something is teach American history accurately and emphasize the greatness of our country. Something I absolutely loved that my school did, is they taught the truth of slavery. And I think that is such a hard topic to talk about with a lot of students. It's very emotional, very sad. But I think in order also for us to grow as people who want to be involved in that civic engagement and patriotism, is we talk about the truth, the really bad things as well. And I think talking about that changed my whole perspective on it. Because to me, it was like, oh yeah, that happened so long ago. But where are those lasting effects? And I think my school did a great job on having me really think of where those lasting effects are. Where do we see them today? How did they shape society? What were all the negatives of it, and how it really sent a downturn for our social cohesion? How it really turned us inward and hating each other. And that's something that we need to fix, Something also is Number 3 is strengthen law and order. Defunding the police has proven disastrous. I mean, we are fighting to even handle little small wrecks on the side of the road nowadays. Or people getting their house broken into. Cops can't show up anymore, they are there, but it's hard for them to get employees. And we need to back our law enforcement and reinforce personal accountability. Now, police officers are not above the law either. We must hold them accountable for their injustices. But I also believe that there are men and women on those teams with integrity that are fighting for justice in there. And I think we really need to strengthen law and order that have a foundational moral and ethical code. 4, reject moral relativism. They're objective moral truths. Upholding these values strengthens society and protects future generations. I mean, the one thing, like when we think about law and order, we always go back to our Constitution or our amendments within that, and how it is so important that we always tie back to that whenever a Supreme Court case comes up, because that's how we decide it. We have a foundation, so then it's fair, it's just, it's equal. And I think that is something that we really need to reflect on within our country, is where do our moral and ethical codes come together? And where can we start this rebuilding of a strong central country that has a good foundation? And number 5, limit social media's influence. Now, I think social media has great positives, like when you want to publicize something that's not really talked about and it needs to be publicized. So getting some news out that people need to be aware of. For example of this could be like any daily news, stuff like that that's happened in your county. Like, let's say there was a shooting nearby. Being aware of that is really useful, so then you can make sure to be on guard a bit. But I also do think that limiting it would be a good idea, like reducing screen time primarily and encouraging real-world interactions. It could help shift the focus from self-centered online validation to maybe a genuine social responsibility. Because I feel like a lot of kids, especially my age, we turn to that whenever we're not getting the, our wants from a physical and social aspect. And I think that's something that just happens in life. You're going to go through those times of learning, and as you experience things and you're exposed to different situations, you're going to learn. And I think that's very important. A lot of people nowadays lack almost basic social skills because of it. Now, to close this off, our very first episode, at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of America do we want? One where ideologies continue to chip away at traditions, or one where we restore faith, family, and freedom? Radical individualism and moral relativism are tearing at the fabric of our society. Now, I'm talking about this, and a lot of my sources have seemed quite biased and been a bit more conservative, but I believe that no matter what side you align with, left, right, independent, anything else within those lines, I really think we should just look at this all together. Where is that universal truth? Radical individualism and moral relativism are tearing really hard, but we have the power to reverse this decline if we're willing to do it. 80% the want, 20% the do. That's it for today, guys. I'm just going to say it anyway. If you enjoyed this conversation, do not forget to subscribe and follow us on all social medias. Make sure to leave a review of what you thought of this episode and share your thoughts. Also, comment down below if you have any other ideas for episodes for us to talk about. And one day, we can maybe even get to the point where we have some live conversation going on with this as well. I hope to bring on people in the future to do some collaborative episodes. And let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, take care and stay accountable.